Hello, and welcome to Colonel O'Truth's Miniature Issues. In today's episode, I'm building an upside-down windmill high above the city. Everything is handmade, no 3D printing, with simple techniques and simple materials. This is Undercrag City. I've been reserving a space for this piece for some time, and although I hope it's going to be a very special addition to the city, it starts off in much the same way as everything else. A simple piece of board, a bit of a sketch, and away we go. I'm shaping this piece of board to be the top of the new addition, but I'm going to be working largely upside down. I've sketched out a rough location for where the mill will sit, and then with a piece of foam roughly cut to shape, I'm starting to visualize how it's going to look. I'm slashing the surface of the foam, and then I'll pull it apart with my thumb to give a rock texture. Much of this will end up getting covered, but for the sake of a few extra moments, it's worth adding the texture just so I don't have to do it later, should anything be visible. And then piece by piece, I build up my rock formation, seemingly at random, but I'm taking into account the thicknesses of my materials and building them to a specific depth to suit the windmill later. The yellow foam is 30mm thick, the black board is 5mm thick. It helps to work against the rest of the model, so I get a good fit later on and minimize the amount of filling I have to do. I've drawn a concept for the mill. I want it to be hexagonal rather than square. And this means dissecting some circles. I need a variety of different hexagons, as the mill is going to be thicker at the top than it is at the bottom. I also need 2 octagons. I want the final piece of the mill at the very bottom to look like it turns, so that the sails can be made to face the wind. I've decided a good way of doing this is to offset octagons against hexagons, because that way the 2 sets of shapes won't line up perfectly, giving the impression that something has moved. There's a lot more planning in this piece than there have been in most of my other houses. My walls have to be tapered, so it's not good enough just to hack out rectangles and fill in the gaps later. Everything has to be a pretty good fit. I'm marking windows and a door. The top layer is going to be living quarters and will be visibly different to the rest of the mill. I cut my windows out before I've cut out these small walls. It's easier that way. With the walls for the top section cut out, I need the top and bottom plates, the two largest hexagons. And I'm cutting a hole in the very top one for wiring later so that I can get LEDs into the model. Now it's a case of carefully constructing, leaning one wall against the next as they taper inwards. That piece is slightly too small. I've made another one. There, the top level's done. Time for the next one. I'll build the next level straight onto the top piece. I'm building these sections separately rather than all as one piece, so that I can have slight differences in between. These will become accentuated when it's time for detailing. It's all going together quite easily. Now for my octagons. I've drawn a hexagon inside the octagon so that it lines up. This is all very quick. There's no detailing here except for a small hole in one wall where the shaft for the sails will sit. I'm packing out the base so that I've got something to sit that against. This 4mm basswood will be used for constructing the sails. The only thing I have to keep in mind here is where the shaft will be relative to the door. The last pieces to be added to the structure will form the extra height so that the mill protrudes from the rock. This can be fairly rough, it's never going to be seen. Now a quick bit of a change, as I've decided to add one more large hexagon to the top of the model. This surface will sit against the overhanging rock. Line it up nicely and put my spacer in again. Now it's time to add some detailing. I'm taking a sheet of balsa and drawing planks into it at 2mm spaces, which I will use to clad most of the building. I'm starting at the bottom and working my way up. The bottom 2 sections will be completely timbered, with no windows. This is very quick and easy to do. Now I'll cut some of the strips off and use them to hide the joins and line the edges. I hope you're enjoying this video. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, please do, and please like and share with your friends. Feel free to ask questions and leave comments. I answer all of them, and we're building up quite a chatty little community. Thank you for your support. The relatively small dimensions of the building rapidly become a lot chunkier when you add the details. Keep this in mind when you're designing. And now for the next floor. And finally onto the living quarters. This floor is being detailed in the same way as all of the houses in Undercrag City. It will become a Tudor-style timber construction. The main horizontals went on first, and then the main verticals. The smaller details will be added last. I want a balcony to run around 4 sides of the building, so I'm using matchsticks to add some support. These are nice and bulky and immediately add character. Now for some basswood rather than balsa. It's much stronger. Two 2mm wide strips. And I'm constructing the supports for my balcony. And I've added some extra matchsticks to make everything look nice and bulky. There's a short bridge, giving access to the door from the rocks. And now balsa wood treads all the way around. The balsa has a nicer texture than the basswood when painted. I've decided to add extra bulk down at the bottom as well. More matchsticks. It's worth the extra little bit of work to add all of this character. Time for an undercoat. Light grey, as usual. While my undercoat's drying, I'll start constructing the sails. I'm going for a simple 4-sail cross shape. I'm using 4mm basswood for the main spokes, and then matchsticks to support the sail structure. Just like the mill, the sails will be tapered, wider at the top than the bottom. And there's a piece to form the shaft. I've knocked up a rough table so that I can put all of this together nice and easily. The insulation tape in the middle stops everything from sticking to the table. That needs to dry. So it's back to the mill. The grey is dry, so I'm covering everything with brown ink. And by the time that's done, the sail structure is dry, so I can check it against the mill. I want the spokes and the shaft of the sails to look like they're joined through iron brackets. So I'm using thick paper and wrapping it carefully around the joins. Just that extra little bit of thickness really makes a difference. And an extra band further down the shaft where it will protrude from the building. The paper and glue also serve to strengthen the structure. Now I can undercoat this piece as well. It's delicate work. The mill gets a heavy dry brush of pale yellow everywhere, and then white, especially in the panels of the top floor. It's a very quick and easy but effective technique. When it's dry, it's time to pick out all of the timber work with brown ink again. The brown ink over all of the dry brushing gives a really nice wood tone. That's looking very nice. That was the fiddly bit. Now the rest of the building is all timber, so it's all brown ink. Nice and quick and easy. Getting into all of the little gaps. The ink dries very evenly. Now the sail structure gets the same treatment. It looks like I'm being rough, but I'm actually being quite gentle. This is quite fragile at the moment. It'll be strengthened when I add the sails. The wood finish on this ends up being slightly darker than the mill. That's because the balsa is more absorbent than the basswood and matchsticks. Now to add my window glass. You'll have seen this before. It's acetate sheet, obscured on both sides with Mod Podge. Bit fiddly getting the glue inside the window frames. I have to work through the building. Takes a bit of messing around, but they're in eventually. It doesn't matter if there's extra PVA on the glass, it dries clear. Now to add a little detail to the door. Very small pieces of black card for hinges and a door plate. Perfect job for my trusty pointy stick. Now just a tiny touch of silver paint, followed by a tiny touch of rust ink, and that's all it needs. My balcony needs a handrail. These are strips of basswood that have been pre-coloured in exactly the same way as the rest of the building. I'm cutting all of my uprights first. This is a bit fiddly. The pieces are very light and therefore easily knocked out of place. When they're all in, I'll add the handrails themselves, one section at a time. The uprights aren't perfectly aligned with each other, which is good, it adds character. Back to the sail. I'm picking out my iron brackets in black ink. And then I'm moving on to designing the sails themselves. I don't want them to be perfect, so I'm using my cutting lines as a guideline. I glue them into place and add water so that they sag around the struts. When they're dry, these will add some much needed strength to this structure. I think that looks pretty sail-like. I'm giving them a coat of grey ink. I'm being fairly careful here, but it's an easy thing to touch in the brown should I go over any of the timbers. I'll leave that to dry and get back to my cliff. I've drawn a paved section that will meet up with the little bridge to the door, and I've got to think about how it links into the walkway from Pipistrelle Street. So I'm adding steps, simply cut into the foam. That walkway has been there for quite a while, waiting for something for it to lead to. Now that I'm sure I'm heading in the right direction, I can draw in some paving stones and cobbles with an ordinary pencil. It's all very blocky, but it won't be soon. Before I add any more detailing, I'm going to check how everything fits together. There's my mill, and the bridge does a pretty good job of meeting the stone walkway. I think I want a door in the side of the cliff. There are plenty of these around Undercrag City. I'm going for a large double door facing the mill. I'm just using simple pieces of card, more balsa wood, a heavily ruled line down the middle to show the join between the two doors, and then some hand-drawn planks. Now brown ink straight onto the balsa. And put my frame on top. I need to get that to fit properly. I'll just glue this straight into the cliff face and finish the painting of the wood later. At last it's time to start building up the rock, filling in all of the gaps with red Das clay. working it in with PVA to keep it malleable and stop it cracking as it dries. I'm shaping it with a brush. Now that that's drying, I'm going to dry brush my sails with light grey and then white to add some shape and texture. And pick out my brown. Now I'll highlight my iron brackets with the same silver and rust ink as I used for the door hardware. Just touches here and there, not blocks of colour. My clay is dry enough to start adding some sand. This will become mosses. Just patches, not the whole thing. I want plenty of exposed stone. And then a dark grey undercoat over everything. You can see I've already highlighted my door, but I haven't yet added the final brown ink. I've decided that my door is too big. I want a single door instead. So I've cut an insert, and it's a simple matter to drop it into place and hide the joins with some more sand. That's better. I want the structure to look like it's supported from above, so I'm adding ropes. This is fine electrical wire, twisted into shape and looped to fit over the matchsticks at the corners of the building. When each rope is in place, I add a few tiny daubs of PVA to hold everything together. Back to the rock. Some heavy dry brushing with light grey followed by white. This back and forth between different pieces means that drying times aren't too much of a problem. I can work on something while something else is drying. I paint the ropes in with the same light grey as I used on everything else. I'm being fairly careful, but it doesn't matter if I go over the edges. I'm going to use brown ink again, and everything will look fine in the end. And there are my sails in place temporarily. Now to add a handrail to my little stairs. I'm lining the edge of the cliff with small pieces of Das clay, and I'll lay my uprights into this. Pushing them into place with my trusty pointy stick. After a little bit of brown paint and some highlighting to give an earth texture, I'm covering all of my stone with a thin black wash. This is followed, while wet, with dobs of green and washes of yellow. It's a messy job, so I'm using my messy mat. A thin brown wash on my earth. Everything's allowed to run together to give different tones. With all that done, I can put another handrail in. I've finished my little door as well. Now just a touch of grass on my earth sections, just for some added interest. A little bit of PVA, a sprinkling of static grass, and tap it off immediately. And now it's time to put the two pieces together. In goes the mill. Careful not to break the bridge. And sculpt in the gaps. I'm trying to make the rock more of an interesting shape than just a flat surface. I want an organic appearance. With the clay done and more sand added, it's starting to look pretty good. Back to my dark grey paint. This means working over some of what I've already done, but that's a constant theme in Undercrag City. It's what gives the city its organic look. I've decided that my sails look too clean and perfect, so I'm going to add texture using PVA and tiny pieces of toilet roll. Starting at the top edge of the sail, where it should be bunched or folded over, and then the bottom. And a few imperfections here and there. Little pieces of toilet paper blended in with glue. They become almost imperceptible, but just break up the outline a little bit and add some interesting textures. Everything in Undercrag City is old and worn out. These sails shouldn't look too clean. I just keep going until I'm happy. That's looking much better. Now it's time to paint the sails again, the same grey ink as before. And back to my black and green and yellow washes. and at last I can add this in to the rest of the model. It's heavy. I need to pin it in place until the PVA dries. While that's setting, I'm tidying up my sails. I've dry brushed them with white, and now I'm going over my brown ink again, wherever the dry brushing strayed too far. It's all very simple stuff. Time for the finishing touches. I've sculpted in the join between the new piece and the rest of the city, added sand, and I'm painting it grey, and you can guess what colours come next. As before, the grey and the dry brushing stray slightly over the lines into the work that was already done. This blends it all together. This city has become far more complicated than I ever really imagined it would. The cautious use of my painty tea towel to protect the city from drops of ink. And we're very nearly done. Finally, in go the sails. And I'm turning them slightly just to make them a little more interesting. There we are, the Sky Mill, with its rickety walkway to Pipistrelle Street. I think you'll agree that's quite an interesting addition to the city. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you'll join me next time to see what's coming. Until then, bye for now.